I'm Brooklyn Hayes. I'm 34 years old. And this morning, as I walked into the grand old Sterling estate, the venue for my family's annual gathering, I knew I was about to become their favorite punchline again. The coat I had on, bought it for $42 at an outlet in Austin, Texas. And honestly, I'm still proud of the deal. But to the people swirling $100 glasses of wine nearby, I probably looked like a lost delivery person. The Sterlings are one of the most well-known real estate dynasties on the East Coast, especially around the Philadelphia area. Our name started with my great-grandfather, Lewis Sterling, who turned a few acres of farmland into some of Pennsylvania's most luxurious real estate developments after World War II. Over the decades, the family empire grew, malls, resorts, and mansions like the one I stood in, over 20,000 square feet, walnut floors, and hand-carved Italian ceilings. One thing that never changed through generations: the obsession with appearances. I was born into what you might call the modest branch of the Sterling family, if that's even a word they recognize. My father, Nathan, the youngest son of Adele Sterling, chose a simpler life. He fell in love with my mother, a small-town nurse from Montana, and gave up his inheritance to live in a modest ranch-style home in suburban Pittsburgh. They raised me with love and hard work, until a car crash took both of them when I was just 16. I still remember that first morning moving into the Sterling estate after the funeral. My uncle, Vincent, the current head of the family, looked me in the eye and said, "You can stay here, but remember, kindness doesn't pay the bills." From that day on, I lived like a shadow in a house full of crystal chandeliers and performative laughter. Every year, my family holds a family conference. It sounds noble, but in reality, it's 3 days of bragging, comparisons, and planning how to divide wealth. I've never been asked to speak at one of these meetings. No one's ever asked, "Brooklyn, how have you been?" Instead, I get the subtle glances at my 3-year-old shoes or the snide comments from my cousin Cassidy. Is Brooklyn still working at that, consulting thing? They call me the poor cousin, and they say it like I can't hear, but I do. I remember. And I've learned. While they were toasting $50 million deals, I was quietly reading real estate reports and betting on neighborhoods about to transform. While they gifted their sons $500,000 sports cars for their 21st birthdays, I lived in a 700 square foot apartment and saved every penny to invest. I don't wear a Rolex. I don't post photos from Bora Bora. I don't have a gold-plated swimming pool. But I have something they don't: a plan. And a leather briefcase filled with the kind of truth that could silence this entire room. Today marks the first day of this year's family gathering. I stood before the massive oak doors, took a deep breath. Behind me sat my 2012 Subaru Outback, loyal through the years. Ahead of me stood the Sterling name, sipping Dom Perignon, talking returns and private equity. They had no idea I'd come back with more than childhood memories. They didn't know I'm no longer the poor Brooklyn they remember. I'm not the only one in the Sterling family who was ever underestimated, but maybe I'm the only one who never forgot the look in their eyes when they did. After losing my parents in that accident at 16, I didn't have anyone to call home until my grandmother, Margaret Sterling, stepped in. People used to call her the Iron Lady of the Sterling dynasty, not because she was cold, but because she was too smart to be manipulated, too sharp to be tricked, and too wealthy to need to prove anything. She was the original founder of Sterling Capital, long before her son Vincent turned it into a flashy, hollow empire. At our first dinner together in her quiet penthouse in West Philadelphia, she didn't ask about my GPA or what prestigious school I wanted to attend. She simply poured me a cup of tea and asked, "What do you think it means to be wealthy?" Meek, with frayed sneakers and a broken backpack, awkwardly answered, "Having a lot of money?" She smiled, poured more tea. "No, Brooklyn, wealth isn't about your bank account. It's about the ability to say no. To live life on your terms without bowing to anyone. And funny enough, the ones who show off the most often have the least of that." From that moment, I understood. And I started learning. She taught me like a private mentor. No whiteboards, no PowerPoints, just notebooks, printed market news from Bloomberg, and hours spent hovering over city zoning maps with a magnifying glass. She never taught me how to keep money. She taught me how to grow it, quietly. While Cassidy, my cousin who loves flaunting her Hermes bags on Instagram, blew her 200 grand inheritance on a Miami penthouse for birthday parties, I used mine to put down payments on 3 small houses in a gentrifying suburb outside Pittsburgh. One I listed on Airbnb, one I rented to a young couple, and the third I lived in for 3 years. Compound interest doesn't need Wi-Fi. It just needs time. But what haunts me even now isn't the numbers. It's the moment I discovered the one truth no one in the family dared to say out loud. Grandma Margaret was forced into early retirement. I heard it one night when she thought I was asleep. I came downstairs for water and found her on the phone. Her voice was low but firm. "Vincent, you told the board I was senile just because I refused to pull funding from affordable housing projects? I built Sterling Capital. I don't need a dime from any of you. But I will not watch you trample over everything I stood for just to build another golf course." I froze behind the wall, my hand gripping the glass so hard it turned pale. In that moment, I realized she hadn't just saved me from being an orphan. She was the only soul left in this family with a conscience. And I would carry that forward, not with speeches. 2 months later, Margaret Sterling died suddenly from a stroke. Her will divided her estate evenly among 7 grandchildren, each receiving around $250,000. I remember the look on Vincent's face as he read it, almost pleased that she hadn't left the bulk to anyone. "I guess she finally realized fairness is best," he said. But I didn't believe she left things that simple. Not her. Not with the precision she had in every investment, every word she ever wrote in her journals. That night, I opened the safe in her bedroom. The code was the day I moved in with her. Inside was a single envelope, powder blue, handwritten, "Brooklyn. This is just the beginning." Inside, detailed real estate maps, notes on 6 abandoned properties near a major redevelopment zone, legal contacts, bank accounts under shell companies, and one final line in bold black ink. "Sweetheart, money should move ahead of reputation. Never let them know what you're building until it's too late to stop you." And that's exactly what I did. No one knows how many properties I've acquired under Silverthread Properties over the past 6 years. No one knows I'm the landlord of the very apartment building where Cassidy and 3 other family members live, thinking they're renting from some nameless investment firm. But tomorrow, they'll know. And I'll stand before them, not shouting, but just loud enough to make the whole room go silent. I learned the art of silence from my grandmother, but silence doesn't mean weakness. For me, it's a strategy, a weapon, and a promise. At 28, while Cassidy was throwing her 30th birthday bash with fireworks on a yacht in Florida, I quietly signed the deal to acquire Southline Plaza, a commercial complex made up of 3 aging buildings in the southern redevelopment zone of Philadelphia. I had walked those parcels 3 years before putting down the first deposit. And just like Grandma Margaret used to say, true value shows up before the shiny signs do. By the time I turned 30, I owned 15 properties, 12 residential homes stretching from Pittsburgh to Baltimore, and 3 small commercial buildings. All were held under different shell companies, consolidated within a group called Hayes & Hollow LLC, a name that had nothing to do with Sterling and didn't appear on any of the family's public records. What made me most proud wasn't the numbers. It was the fact that no one in the family knew, not a single one. Maybe they were blinded because I still lived in a 1-bedroom apartment in Queen Village. I still drove my old Subaru, wore coats from outlet stores, and turned down brunch invites from aunts who only seemed to care about who was dating whom, who bought a new Chanel bag, or who should be cut from the inheritance trust. I hired attorney Ronald Eastman, formerly with a major venture capital firm in New York, to set up complex corporate layers, split ownerships, and shield the identity of the ultimate owner. Even my real estate brokerage, Skyline 8, was operated under the name of a contract executive. I only appeared through email, business banking accounts, and Zoom meetings where my camera always stayed off. The greatest satisfaction? Every month I received thousands of dollars in rent from relatives who once saw me as a freeloader. Cassidy and her husband Derek now live in a 1,900-square-foot penthouse at Riverline Residences, which used to be owned by a Canadian corporation. When they signed the lease last year, I was the one who approved it, through my agent. They've never met the landlord, but they love the new management, so much more professional and polished. Oh, if only they knew I was the one who instructed security to check IDs for every guest entering the building. They'd probably scream about class discrimination. But I didn't do it for petty revenge. I did it because I understand the value of safety. And I run things like someone who doesn't need to show off to be respected. Every property I bought had a reason. An old row home in South Jersey? I picked it up after discovering a new light rail line had been approved to pass nearby. 2 commercial buildings in Wilmington, Delaware? I bought them from a bankrupt business owner just as the state began rolling out new tax incentives for that district. I don't invest in places that are already lit up. I invest in the dark corners no one notices, then make them shine. But no success comes without a turning point. 2 weeks before this year's family gathering, I got a call from Martha, my grandmother's longtime housekeeper, now the estate manager at Sterling Mansion. Her voice trembled as she said, "Brooklyn. Mr. Vincent plans to propose selling the family mansion to a luxury condo developer. The documents are already drafted. They didn't loop you in because you don't hold enough voting share to stop it." I was quiet for a moment. Then I said, "Thank you, Martha. Have the peppermint tea ready. I'll be there early." As soon as I hung up, I opened the safe in my bedroom. Inside was a 60-plus page binder. Net worth evaluations, property ownership records, legal structure diagrams, and a letter of intent to purchase shares of Crown Pacific Group, the very company negotiating to acquire the Sterling estate. I had bought 32% of Crown Pacific's shares 3 months ago. They didn't know the person they were about to sell the family mansion to was me. And that was just step 1. I wasn't going to speak. I wouldn't raise my voice. I wasn't going to throw charts into the meeting like they always did. I was going to show them, step by step, that while they were buying status with money, I had used their condescension to build an empire. And this time, I wouldn't be poor Brooklyn, standing in the corner. I would be the one standing in the center of the room, carrying a leather briefcase. And a truth that would ensure no one in the family ever dared to underestimate anyone again. The main conference room was on the 2nd floor of the Sterling estate. It used to be my grandmother's library. Now it had been upgraded to a multi-use space with a projector screen, wireless sound system, and imported leather chairs. Elegant, refined, and utterly soulless. I arrived at 8:55 a.m., still wearing my simple charcoal suit. No logos, no monograms, no loud colors. I sat near the end of the row, by the window overlooking the rose garden my grandmother once tended. They had replaced all the flowers with designer turf. I stayed quiet. The meeting began at 9 o'clock sharp, with Vincent, my uncle, standing proudly at the head of the room. "Welcome, everyone, to the 12th Sterling Family Conference. This year we'll be discussing asset growth, expanding influence, and elevating the family brand." No one mentioned Margaret. No one mentioned who built the brand they were so proud of. Cassidy kicked off the first showcase. She displayed photos of her new home in Beverly Hills, 6 bedrooms, a petal-shaped pool, and a Versailles-inspired fountain. She gushed about her new husband, a director who once won a side award at Sundance. And she added, "We're thinking of investing in next wave art NFT." The whole room applauded. Next was Ethan, my cousin, currently Vice President of Strategic Initiatives at Sterling Capital, a vague title Vincent had made up. He bragged about his salary, stock options, and the McLaren parked out front. Ethan even played a video of his employees reacting when he surprised them with iPhones for the holidays. When it was my turn, no one called on me. Not one glance came my way. Except for Cousin Macy, who leaned over and whispered loud enough for the whole table to hear. Brooklyn still does, finance consulting stuff, right? Freelance? Or does Uber have an investing arm now? The table giggled. I stayed silent, gave a small smile. Lunch was a Southern-inspired upscale buffet. Organic fried chicken, kale salad, and gluten-free cornbread. I was about to take my drink and head out to the garden when Vincent spoke. "Brooklyn, hold on. Come join us. There's something we need to discuss." I turned around. Everyone had gathered around the main table, and the only empty seat was directly across from him. Sat down. The tension was unmistakable. Vincent slid a slim folder toward me. "The family has agreed to establish a family support fund for members who haven't yet achieved financial stability." No one said a word, but all eyes turned toward me. Aunt Linda jumped in to soften the blow. "You know, sweetheart, not everyone's had the same opportunities, and we, as a family, should extend our hands. Brooklyn, there's no shame in accepting help. The fund can offer up to $2,000 a month to cover living expenses, and it could also help you enroll in some new skills training," Cassidy chimed in, her voice tinged with barely concealed pity. "Like a basic investing course? There's one on Coursera, super beginner-friendly, really accessible." Ethan leaned forward with a smile like he was about to launch into a TED Talk. "Or maybe you could intern at my firm? Sure, it's a bit late to start a career, but hey, there's still hope." I laughed, a real laugh that time. Not because it was funny, but because I'd never seen a room full of supposedly successful people be so completely short-sighted. "Thank you, everyone," I said calmly, "but I'm quite capable of covering my own living expenses." Cassidy raised an eyebrow. "Really? But you're still in that tiny apartment, right? And no new car? I just assumed you were struggling," I replied, my tone flat as still water. "That apartment was a choice, and the old car runs just fine. I prioritize income-generating assets over symbols." No one laughed. Vincent quickly changed the subject. But something in his eyes had shifted. It wasn't dismissal anymore. It was doubt. That afternoon, as the others gathered around to marvel at resort blueprints in Colorado, I stepped out onto the balcony. The wind moved through the tall white columns, carrying the scent of mint from the garden behind. I stood there for a long while, my fingers tightening around the leather briefcase at my side. Inside was a full dossier: real estate deeds, company structures, and a letter confirming my share purchase in Crown Pacific Group. I had been publicly humiliated, but tomorrow I would stand, and one by one, they would have to look again. Not because I needed their approval, but because truth carries more weight than any watch on their wrists. Monday, 8:58 a.m., I walked into my grandmother's old study with the leather briefcase in hand and a level of calm I had never known before. My entire family was already present. Vincent stood at the head of the table, his usual self-assured, stately demeanor intact. Cassidy was fixing her hair. Ethan was showing off pictures of the resort he was pretty much locked in to buy with his investor buddies. And me? I said nothing. Didn't interrupt, didn't posture. I just sat down, placing my briefcase on the table like it held a treasure map. Vincent began with his usual ceremonial tone. "Family, today we formally signed the agreement to sell the Sterling estate to Crown Pacific. Offer price $41 million. The funds will be distributed according to share percentages. We're all in agreement, yes?" I raised my hand. The irritation in the room was palpable. "I'd like to share a few thoughts before we sign." Vincent glanced at his watch, straining to stay polite. "Brooklyn, we're on a strict timeline with Crown Pacific's legal reps. If you have something to say, please be quick." I stood, pulled from my briefcase a thick, neatly clipped packet of documents. "Family," I said slowly, "I think it's time everyone heard the truth about the poor cousin." Cassidy furrowed her brow. Ethan folded his arms. Vincent leaned back in his chair. I switched on the projector. No flashy graphics, just a clear headline. Personal net worth, Brooklyn Hayes, $76.2 million. The room fell dead silence, like someone had pulled the plug on the power. I currently own 15 properties across 3 states, including 3 commercial centers and the Riverline Residences complex, where Cassidy, Derek, and the entire Macy family currently reside. Cassidy's face went pale. You're the owner of Riverline. I nodded. The rent increase last quarter? I approved that. The 9 a.m. security alerts? My decision. And if anyone's wondering why you didn't know, it's because I didn't want you to. Ethan shot up from his seat, his voice cracking. How could you? Someone with no connections, no status, possibly. I turned to look Vincent square in the eye. Grandma Margaret once told me, if you have to choose between being recognized and doing what's right, do what's right and let the results speak for themselves. I pulled out another document. This is the certificate confirming the transfer of 30% ownership in Sterling Holdings from anonymous transactions through 3 intermediary companies, signed and finalized 6 months ago. Vincent went pale. That's not possible. I control all internal transactions. I cut in. Not when you yourself signed off. Without reading the final entity name in the chain. Crown Pacific Holdings? I bought it. Step by step, quietly, and as of today, I'm the 2nd largest shareholder. I lay down one more file. And this is the incorporation document for the Margaret Sterling Legacy Trust, an independent investment trust I own, which now controls a total of 35% voting rights in Sterling Holdings. That's enough to block any decision, including the sale of this estate. The entire room froze. Ethan's voice shook. What are you planning to do? I answered simply, to stop you from destroying her legacy. Vincent sat down without another word. For the first time in his life, he no longer controlled the room. Cassidy choked out, why didn't you say something sooner? I looked around at all of them, those who once laughed at my silence. Because if I'd said something, who would have believed me? And more importantly, I didn't need you to believe me, I just needed the right moment. I closed the briefcase. This estate won't be sold. It will be converted into the headquarters of a charitable foundation in her name, a space to teach financial literacy to young women, minorities, and working-class families. People like my mother once was. I stood up. And from today forward, if you want to make a decision, you'll need me at the table. I left the room. The sound behind me wasn't noise. It was the quiet kind of chaos. The collapse that doesn't explode, but leaves a hollow silence in every person who once looked down on me. Today, I didn't just reclaim my seat. I redefined the true value of the Sterling name. 3 days after that shocking turn, my phone hadn't stopped ringing. Not with congratulations, but with what I called strategic relationship repositioning attempts. Fake friendly calls from the very people who once smirked while calling me the family freeloader. Vincent was the first to request a meeting. At a private Italian restaurant in downtown Philly, the same one that once turned down my reservation for not meeting the membership criteria. That day, I arrived on time, in a simple black dress, last season's low-top shoes, and still carrying the same unbranded handbag. He stood, shook my hand with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Brooklyn, I truly didn't expect this, but I have to say, I admire how you've run things. Sharp vision. Maybe it's time we did something big together. What do you think? I placed my glass of water down. I'll consider partnering if the project aligns with real values, but if it's more luxury golf resorts or skyscrapers named Sterling just to impress the media, then I'll have to decline. He frowned, then smiled again. You really are like your mother, but more than that, you're an upgraded version of both her and Margaret. I didn't feel proud. I felt amused. Those words, if spoken 10 years earlier, might have touched me, But now, they were just chips turned face up on a table of power plays. As for Cassidy, she showed up at my new office, the Margaret Sterling Foundation. Now headquartered inside the very family estate they once planned to bulldoze for a luxury condo tower. "Hey sis," she said softly, "I've been thinking. I want to contribute to the foundation. I have this idea for a personal development seminar series for independent women. Maybe partner with my friend's sustainable fashion brand too?" I invited her to sit, offered her water. "Good idea, but the foundation doesn't serve commercial interests. You can volunteer if you'd like. We're launching a financial literacy program for single mothers in West Philadelphia." Her smile stiffened, but she nodded. "Of course, I just want to help." I nodded back. No judgment. No need. 3 months after the family summit, the Sterling estate looked entirely different. Gone were the grand meeting rooms with leather chairs and crystal chandeliers. In their place were classrooms with whiteboards, projectors, and beginner-level personal finance books. The classic living room that once hosted gala dinners now welcomed single mothers, students of color, immigrants, and people who'd been denied bank loans due to bad credit scores. The basement had become a legal aid center, connecting volunteer attorneys with residents facing eviction or predatory contracts. And the Rose Garden, where I once sat with my grandmother learning the meaning of assets, was now a community garden growing organic vegetables, providing free produce for the local neighborhood. One afternoon, while I was inspecting progress on the East Wing's community library, Martha, my grandmother's former housekeeper, walked up to me. "Miss Brooklyn, I dreamed of Miss Margaret last night. She was wearing that old navy dress, standing under the wisteria tree." She didn't say anything, just smiled and nodded. I turned away so Martha wouldn't see my eyes well up. She knows this place is finally being used the way she always hoped it would. I still live in my old apartment. The Subaru is still parked in the basement garage. But I no longer hide. I speak at finance workshops. I'm invited on podcasts to talk about intangible assets. I get emails from women across America, those once labeled useless, untalented, or just poor, asking, "Where did you start?" I always answer, "From the place where no one believed you could." And you have to accept that no one has to believe, you just have to not give up. My family treats me differently now. There's distance, caution, even envy. But there's also a trace of respect. I don't need them to bow, I just need them not to trample on what my grandmother built. And not to dismiss someone just because they choose to live humbly. I was once a shadow in this mansion. Now I'm the one who turns the lights on. I'm sitting in the western garden of the Sterling estate, the part once abandoned after my grandmother passed, now a vibrant outdoor space for students in the Real Finance program. Morning sunlight spills over papaya trees and bok choy plants, grown by a group of high schoolers experimenting with after-school gardening. A young Latina girl named Maria walks up, sketchbook in hand, and whispers to me, "Ms. Brooklyn, one day I want to be an investor, like you." I smiled, not because Maria wants to be like me, but because she dared to say that. In a place where, 10 years ago, no one would have thought a kid without the Sterling name could even dream it. There's one truth I never say in public talks. I used to want them to see me. Desperately. I once hoped that just once Cassidy would stop calling me the poor cousin. That Vincent might ask what I did, not just how I was getting by. I used to believe that if I succeeded enough, stayed quiet enough, remained humble enough, they'd finally recognize me. But then I realized, true value doesn't lie in recognition. It lies in your ability to keep going. Even when no one sees you. No one claps. No one believes. I didn't start with an easy path. I wasn't given privilege, hidden connections, or networking brunches on the Upper East Side. But I had one person who believed in me. My grandmother. And I have something no one can take away from me. Knowledge, discipline, and a long-term vision. While they were buying cars, I was buying land. While they raised glasses to toast themselves, I quietly signed contracts. While they laughed at my minimalist lifestyle, I smiled back, because I had freedom. I used to think money was something I had to fight for just to survive, but the truth is, what I gained wasn't just wealth. I took back the right to decide my own future and the power to change someone else's. The Sterling estate used to be a symbol of privilege. Now, it's a gateway to knowledge. I was once the orphan girl, living in the shadows of the third-floor bedroom called a burden at dinner. Now I run a foundation with dozens of programs supporting those left out of the cycle of opportunity. I don't need anyone to hand me a microphone. I built my own stage, and I use it to amplify the voices no one hears. Ethan still works at Sterling Capital, but every time he sees me now, there's a softness in his eyes. Vincent, though he's never officially apologized, invited me to join the Sustainable Development Board. I agreed, but only after the luxury condo redevelopment project was converted into a mixed-income housing plan with 30% reserved for low-income families. Cassidy, she no longer calls me the poor cousin. Now, every time she posts on Instagram, she tags my foundation. I don't know if that's a real change of heart or just a new PR trend, but honestly, I don't need to know. Because in the end, I'm no longer doing this for them to see. I'm doing this so no other girl has to spend 15 years proving she deserves to be in the room. People often ask me, Brooklyn, what's your greatest success? Your net worth? The foundation? Saving the mansion? I always answer, it's no longer needing anyone else to define who I am. Success isn't about where you end up. It's about the person you become when no one believes you can. And if you, the one reading or listening to this, have ever been underestimated, mocked for living differently, or dismissed for not fitting someone else's mold, I want to say one thing. You don't need validation to have value. You just need to begin. Quietly is fine, silently is fine. Just don't stop. One day, when you stand in the same room that once made you feel small, you'll realize you are the one who decides where the light in that room shines. Thank you for walking this path with me. I'm Brooklyn Hayes, living proof that strength doesn't need to be loud, it just needs to be precise and right on time. Brooklyn Hayes' story isn't just about reclaiming fairness for herself. It's a powerful reminder that true worth isn't measured by fame, appearances, or flashy wealth, but by courage, persistence, and vision. In real life, we all risk being underestimated for our background, quiet choices, or slow steps. But if you know what you're doing, why you're doing it, and who it's for, then you don't need approval, because your actions will speak louder than anything else. What are your thoughts on Brooklyn's journey and the choices she made? Share your reflections in the comments. And don't forget to follow the channel for more inspiring stories about family and inner strength.